Professor Grimm, at the conference we've heard the different contribution of the scientists, but what about your research project and the added value of knowledge in the individual countries?
I think the main added value to make such an international comparison research is to transcend the national narrow perspective. If you make an investigation, for example in Austria, you have only the Austrian point of view and not the Israeli and so on. And you are all the time in danger to have a wrong imagination of what is specific of your country and what is generalizable. And if you have different national perspectives, you can compare. This is the first aspect. But there is another one. We call this transnational perspective sharing. If you, for example, have a documentary on the Holocaust from a specific country, in this case from France, you can show this in France. In this case, the perspective of the audience is national analogous and not transnational. If you show the same documentary in Israel or in Austria, you have a transnational perspective. And you can now watch the differences in the media effects of the same documentary in the different countries, and you develop a theory of national analogous and transnational communication. The benefit is the transnational theory of communication.
But can you give me an example of your research project to make it clear, please?
Okay. For example, we made a study about the American war in Vietnam. You see this here on the slide. And we asked people in Vietnam about the documentary and their estimation and their evaluation of the Americans in this context. And the same questions we asked also in Vienna. And if you see here, we have a representation of freedom values in Vietnam which decreased, but not in Austria. The Austrians had the feeling that America, after seeing the documentary on the Vietnam War documentary, that they are representatives of freedom, but not the Vietnamese. And the next is more surprising. Blaming the US for recklessness decreased in Vietnam. This was a very brutal warfare, the American war in Vietnam, but the Vietnamese people who watched this documentary on the war had the feeling that they are not motivated to blame America in a stronger way than before. The same aspect we have in the context of processing on US aggression against smaller countries. It's more easier to go in a country which is small and weak as a strong superpower, and then you can say the war in Vietnam was example for this. But also in this case, the Austrian people had the feeling that Americans are a problematic nation with aggressiveness, with recklessness against smaller countries, but not the Vietnamese. Very interesting. You can say positive America's image transfer in Vietnam after watching the documentary. The same documentary in Austria had the opposite effect. This consequence was a more negative image of America in Austria.
So you told me before that there are a lot of connection between the colonial war in Vietnam and the Holocaust, but what about the results of the Holocaust reception study?
Okay, now to the result of our international Holocaust study. We start with the Viennese study part, which includes also Germans and Austrians. And I will only focus on one important aspect: the consequences for national identity after watching the Holocaust documentary Night and Fog. And for this, we have to think, what is national identity? National identity, in the sense of our project, combines three dimensions. The first dimension is patriotism. You can say patriotism is the degree of bonding with your homeland and the people living there. This is a basic aspect of national identity. Then you have a first specific additional dimension in national identity. This is called cosmopolitanism. This means that you are able to reflect your own national identity, that you accept diversity as part of your national identity, and that you have bonding to your compatriots, but in addition you are also open for supranational organizations, for example. These are the three aspects of cosmopolitanism within national identity. And the opposite, the third dimension, is nationalism. Nationalism includes general superiority for your own country. We are the best. The second aspect is separation, walls-up policy. We feel threatened by strangers, and we want to be for our own. You have the example with the Brexit at the moment, and also tendencies in other European countries. And the third aspect is the readiness for violence, for state aims within your country, to a stable order or whatever, also to prevent the country from threatening other nations, the interstate war in this case. And now we see the effect of the documentary of Night and Fog on the specific dimensions of national identity in Vienna. Only example of this, you see here that the main effect is that the nationalism decrease among the Austrians as well as the Germans. This is very interesting because both audiences are descendants of the perpetrators, and they feel critical. They think critical on their own country, and they reduce their nationalistic tendencies. You can say the lecture is, in this case, we learned that an aggressive type of nationalism is it can have the consequence of a Holocaust, of a breach of civilization. And if we see this on a documentary, we don't want to do this in the future. This is a prevention aspect of negative events in the future coming from the experience in the past. The next aspect includes the Germans. They are completely analog in their own nationalism. They reduce it. Interesting was one aspect. If we include an Austrian perpetrator in the role of a witness to history, this was a Nazi, an Austrian Nazi in this case, which tried to defend the politics of the Nazis of this time. And in this case, the critical anti-nationalistic effects in Austria was very strong, stronger than we ever see. In this case, nobody in Austria wants to be like the compatriot in this kind. But the Germans, which are the main perpetrators, if you make the difference between Germany and Austria, in this case, under the conditions of the Austrian perpetrator, have a stable effect. There was no difference between pre and post in this case. The nationalism was equal before and after. And I think it's the explanation could be that the Germans, who are used to the situation to be blamed for the perpetrators in the past, in this case see a little chance to see, okay, in this case Austrians are also perpetrator, and this gives me a little bit more legitimization for patriotism or whatever. In this case, the critical effect was diminished.
So now we had the role of the perpetrators, but what about the other countries, Israel for example?
What's very interesting in Israel, because the Holocaust is part of the official memory culture in a very eminent sense, and some criticisms say that Israel sometimes instrumentalized the Holocaust for nationalist politics. We find that national identity in Israel increase cosmopolitanism. This is the main effect. This was very surprising. This is a difference to the study in Vienna with the German and the Austrian audiences, because they didn't change the cosmopolitan dimension at all. But Israel increased the cosmopolitan. They are thinking critical on their own national identity. They reflect this. They accept more diversity, which is very relevant in a situation with different ethnic groups within Israel, also including weapons conflicts, with the Palestinians, but also other minorities. And interesting is too that in Israel, similar to the countries of the descendants of the perpetrators, the nationalistic position went down. Nationalism decreased. Okay, you have similarity on the level of nationalism. This goes down in all countries, and we have only in Israel a very eminent increase of cosmopolitanism.
Due to the Russian contribution, what are the results in this case in Russia?
We learned from our Russian friends that the main framework of the Holocaust is a great patriotic war. This is very clear, and you can say that this had consequences also for the Holocaust reception. For example, if you look at the results on Imparting of Humanity, you can say that in Russia there was no change in prejudice, for example. You have no decrease, for example, of anti-Semitism, but you have also no increase of anti-Semitism. But you have a positive effect on the level of conflict management. If you see a lot of dead people and the very gruesome pictures of the Holocaust documentary, you can ask yourself, what would you do in a conflict situation? And the majority of the Russians say, we want to find compromise. We don't like to fight. We want to find compromise if we have a conflict, not to go to the end until our enemy is dead or something like this. I think it's one of the most important aspects of humanity transfer by the Holocaust documentary. This is not only in Russia, true, it's also in other countries, but in this case, it's very interesting that this aspect of humanity took place.
Are there other specific issues of the Holocaust reception?
Yes, it was very surprising for us that the political humanitas index we measured increased in Russia. This means they are willing to fight for peace, for human rights, against the persecution of foreigners, to help people in need and something like this. And this is in so far very interesting that in Austria and in Germany this effect didn't take place. In this case, the recipients feel more overstrained by the confrontation with the gruesome pictures. And in this case, they said human beings are not good. You could speak of specific aspect of misanthropy. And this is not true in Russia. They feel engaged after looking at the Holocaust, perhaps with the background of the Great Patriotic War. They were fighting against Hitler, they were victors in this case. And in so far, they have a more moral optimistic lecture from the Holocaust experience. Another interesting difference is connected with national identity. Another interesting aspect of the specific Russian Holocaust reception refers to national identity. You remember that the nationalism decreased in Austria and in Germany, but in this case, and it was also in Israel, and cosmopolitanism increased in Israel, only in Israel. In this case, we have a different pattern of impact. The nationalism increased a little bit, but it was significant. And at the same time, the cosmopolitanism increased very strong. This means, similar to Israel, the Russian audience feel engaged in more cosmopolitan aspects in their national identity, but at the same time the nationalist component is also increased. I would explain this with the specific historical experience of the Russians and the Soviet Union in this time. It was necessary for them to preserve humanity and to protect their own people to fight against. And this includes violence. And they made the experience, this is similar to America and Great Britain, that you can fight for the right thing, then you are in the same time a cosmopolitan person which also are engaged in fight for human rights. But as a descendant of the perpetrators, you cannot think so. It's, in this case, more complicated. You feel the moral overstrain and the misanthropy effect I talked about. I repeat, the effect of the Holocaust documentary in Russia referring to national identity includes a very strong increase in cosmopolitanism, but at the same time an increase also in nationalism.
And is it the same in the Ukraine when you think about Holodomor and Holocaust?
Very interesting. In this case, we have, similar to Russia, an increase in cosmopolitanism, but a decrease in nationalism. This is the best pattern you can have in this case, in the sense of humanitarian values. Our friends in Ukraine will be happy about this, but I will repeat that also the Russian pattern of reaction is very plausible. The Ukraine was not in the situation as the Soviet Union to be able to defeat the Hitler fascism. And it was absolutely necessary to fight against this power, this inhumanic power in this time. And this is a reflection in the memory culture in Russia you can feel until today. The Ukraine, in this case, have a more comfortable situation in this aspect insofar that they have not the stressing the components than the descendants of the perpetrators. They can be engaged in cosmopolitanism, in human rights and something like this, and at the same time they reduce the nationalism within their own national identity. I think it's a very good message. If you look at the current conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, you can say the Holocaust documentary or the Holocaust, or the media-based Holocaust reception help to manage the conflict, or not to escalate them, but to bring them a little bit more on a direction of peace and solution of conflict.
The people in Turkey were perpetrators as well in the Holocaust in the Second World War. But when we think about the current situations, what are the results of your research in Turkey?
It's a splitting effect, you can say. It's similar to Russia and the Ukraine and Israel. They increased cosmopolitanism within the national identity construct. We can say that all countries show this effect, with the exception of the descendants of the perpetrators. Very interesting. But there's no change in nationalism, and in this case, it's for us surprising a decrease of patriotism. They feel more, they feel less bonding to their own people if they are confronted with the Holocaust. I have no explanation at this time. This is what research sometimes caused, that you can answer some questions and other questions grow and are open for further research. The impact of the Holocaust documentary in Turkey shows a strong increase in cosmopolitanism, a weak decrease in patriotism, and the inhomogeneous impact on nationalism. The effect pattern is characterized by a loss of societal coherence and victim-centered mobilization, of a Walter policy, as well as of critical reflexivity to overcome an apparently threatening challenge of national identity. I think it depends on the witnesses to history in this case. Some of our Turkish participants feel more engaged in nationalism. I could imagine that these are the more original Turkish part, and we have a big number of Kurdish people in our sample in this case, and they are more oriented on diminishing or increase of patriotism and nationalism, because they feel perhaps association to their own experience under the conditions of the Turkish state.
So you were in Vietnam as well. It's really far away. What are your results there in your research project?
Okay, first let's have a look at the effects on the receptive participation, because it is very interesting, so far away, and then are confronted with a tragedy in Europe. And you can see in the results that the narrative engagement to feel embedded, included in the story as a recipient are higher than in other countries. It's not a feeling of distance, and the involvement also is very high. Involvement means that they try to find similarities to their own experiences. This is what we can say in general. All recipients are looking for associations to them, what they know, what is common for them, what is their own experience. And the high narrative engagement to be part of the story, I would explain that they have not in the same sense as in Austria and in Germany, a feeling of to be inhibited to go in this story, because it has an aspect of stressing your nervous system, and also in a moral way as part of this historical event, independent of the role as a perpetrator or victim. This is very interesting. Transnational perspective sharing does not include necessarily a more distant type of reception. It is sometimes easier for people far away to go inside the historical stuff than for the people who are very close to this event.
In summary, what is the main result of your research project?
Okay, we can say Imparting of Humanity generally took place in the sense of decrease of prejudices against foreigners. This is a stable result in all countries. The same, the decrease of reactive aggression and of aggression control, the development of a compromise-oriented conflict behavior. In this sense, the Holocaust documentary or the media-based Holocaust reception has an impact on humanity. Then we have a second group of effects. Imparting of Humanity took place selectively, not in all countries, but in some, as political humanitas, in the sense of engagement for human rights, for example. And this was true in Russia, in the Ukraine, and partly also in Vietnam, but not in Israel, not in Austria, and not in Germany. Very interesting. I think this is the result of what we called moral overstrain under some conditions of your country and your memory culture. And also the increase of cosmopolitanism, the main effect on national identity, was found in Israel, Russia, in Ukraine. In this case, cosmopolitan increased, but not in Austria, Germany, and Vietnam. And I think the explanation in this case is that the Holocaust, as a historical event, is combined with aspects of national history. In Russia, with the Great Patriotic War. In Israel, with the fight against the enemies of Israel today. And in the Ukraine, with the current conflict with Russia. In this case, you feel engaged by the Holocaust remembrance to engage for human rights. But in Germany and in Austria, this is not true, because in this case, the feeling is more determined by the aspect of stress and moral overstraining. And last not least, we have a group of effects. Imparting of Humanity didn't take place, and we expected this, but we see that there are some limitations of humanity transfer by a Holocaust documentary, and this is referring to transcultural communitization. If you saw the gruesome pictures of the Holocaust documentary, you feel not the need to be friends with everybody on the world. You feel, in this case, you have a feeling to go to your main group, your family perhaps, or your nation group perhaps, but not with all people. This is a general effect. In no country we made the research, we found an increase in transcultural communitization. And the same is with the global responsibility, which took place sometimes, but in the majority we see in this aspect a limitation of humanity transfer by Holocaust communication.